It's the Locked On Flyers podcast, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that's talking all things development camp.
Yeah, fun.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, you and I were both at development camp for the weekend, and this is our development camp recap. But to cap off development camp at the very, very end after the scrimmage, the Flyers announced Jett Luchanko's ELC. And I think, it was not unexpected, let's say.
Yeah, it was a formality. That was going to happen. So it happened, and now everybody moves on.
Yeah. So, of course, the likelihood of him being on the Flyers next season is next to nothing. But good to see the organization confidence in him to get that ELC done right away. Another just couple things of note from development camp. Massimo Rizzo, who we were really excited to see, unfortunately had a high ankle sprain, and so they were being very careful with him. He did participate in a lot of the drills on and off over camp, but did not participate in the scrimmage, which must have been really disappointing for him. But at least he got some ice time.
He did. I got him to see him for one pushback drill. One.
Yeah.
And it was funny because some of the people missed him. They're like, "You sure it was him?" I'm like, "Yeah, it was his number." And they threw him in there for a second. That's what it was. They were just sparingly using him, but at least enough to let him feel like he was a part of it. So that's fine. He'll be fine.
Yeah, and also Ty Murchison was there at development camp, but also did not participate due to injury. So that was kind of a bummer for him. As far as like the overall camp notes, I think one of the more interesting things to me was learning more about the specificity of what the goals were of camp. And Kara Mori, who is a coach for the women's team at Princeton, was back for her fourth development camp, which is really cool because now she's gotten year to year perspective on a lot of these players and can speak to that. But she talked about the camp's specific goal of building skills from the basic details, and you could see it from really basic skating drills building up to how to use those skating drills in a more set play to then executing them in the scrimmage. And like you could really see that in over the progression of a day's activities.
Yeah, I mean, watching her for the weekend, I could see what she was doing and her influence. And yeah, there's no question she knows what she's doing, and she's trying to, impart that wisdom, and that's good. I did like the one thing that she said, which was true, that it was a less skilled group overall. Because I had said to you, this is probably like the least skilled group that I had seen in 3, 4, or 5 years.
Yeah, I think, that is true. So in terms of, judging this group, it was really hard to do in a grand scheme, but you could judge them against each other for
Right,
sure. But in
right.
terms of the big picture, it was harder to see, especially, with Rizzo out and just the nature of where the Flyers prospects are right now and Mitchkov not being there. I think that would have been a huge benchmark of
Sure, but
difference
that
to
would
see.
all that would have done was just even made it more tilted in a way. It was probably better that he wasn't there, honestly.
Yeah, I guess. And of course, like the fan fest on Saturday was fun with the autographs and little games for the kids to play. Dan Hilferty was doing his thing, walking the crowd, shaking
Yeah,
hands,
that's what
which
he
is
does.
good. he's continuing to do that and, talking to fans directly. I do want to talk specifically about what Brent Flair had to say after camp, because I think that's a key indicator there. And, in terms of who he was kind of focusing on in his comments, right, Russ?
Yeah, I mean, one guy I asked him about was J.R. Avon because they had pumped him up so much last year, and we liked him, and he certainly had a disappointing season. There's no way around it. And so you could tell now that, yeah, while Brent was pointing out the positives of his, you could tell that there's now a little pressure on him to produce this year at Lehigh. Like that came through loud and clear. And that's fair. I mean, again, it may seem unfair because he kind of didn't come out of nowhere, but he wasn't one of their top prospects. But they did sign him, right? Wasn't that his situation? They signed him out of, yeah. So, so they had a lot invested in him based on that. And so, now there's some expectations there.
Yeah, and I asked him about Alexis Gendron as well, because that was,
Yes.
a prospect that they were excited about, that played for the Phantoms, but they sent him back to junior and then he got injured. And so, like, where is he now? And I think that, they see this upcoming year as kind of a make it or break it year for him. Like, can he really be successful and carve a place for himself with the Phantoms and have a chance to improve to the point where maybe he'll get a shot at the NHL? That's kind of where he is now. But
Well, that's
it's
kind of like
his
where he always
scoring
was
is
going to
going to
be,
depend
though.
on it.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
has to score. If he doesn't score, he's not making it. It's that simple. There's
Yeah.
nothing else in his game that's going to make him valuable to the team, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I think that where Brent Flair is a very interesting point in terms of how they're evaluating these players, right?
Well, I think it's how they're evaluating him. Some of these players have to start really popping, and many of them aren't. Uh, the one thing I would disagree that he said Alex Bump looks like an NHL player. I think maybe body type wise, but I saw him still getting muscled out of the crease, out of position. I didn't see enough offensive push from him. Uh, he's got to have a better year in college. I mean, 16 goals is pretty good, but he's got to do better because right now he's looking like a fourth liner or nothing. And so he's
Yeah.
going to have to start showing some of those characteristics.
Yeah, I think so. And I also think, he said that there are two Russian goalies playing over there, which was a little telling, maybe,
Yeah.
about the Alexei Kolosov situation, but we'll see.
I mean, it's telling in the sense that they really don't have much contact with him. The last contact wasn't great, and they really don't know what he's going to do. Like, that's all true.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I think, we're going to dig into the recent draftees, like from this year, a lot over the next week or two, and bring what they did into camp. But I think, for me, the two and maybe two and a half that popped the most, of course, Jett Luchanko with his speed.
Hmm.
And I think that was the key part of his game that you were able to see a lot in camp. But I would also say Noah Powell and Heikki Ruohonen.
Yeah, they definitely all did well. I mean, Jet had one really great chance that he was off to like the right side of the post. It just didn't go in. That was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't like a superstar in the offensive zone in the scrimmage. He wasn't. But again, it's the end of the year. Like Brent said, it's like a summer game. It is a little more amped up than that, but there wasn't much physicality in it. But there was a lot of like active sticks, guys playing defense. It was very
Yeah.
defensive for a while. So, he did have his moments with that where, it took him a little bit to get past it. The one thing, and it was hard to not see this, we're all behind Jett Luchanko. We think he could be a good player. There's not one person in that media group that wasn't well aware that Hellenius and Bouillon were left on the board. Like, there's no other way. It's the elephant in the room. We all were talking about it. Most thought that would have been one of their picks. Nobody's going to like hold it against Jett Luchanko, but I kind of wonder now, how many of the fans are feeling that way too after all the analysis that they heard leading up to the draft. So this is a pick now that the team that he really has to come through probably even better than someone that I thought he was, because I thought he was an early second and other people had him maybe in the 20s. So he's going to have to really produce at some point based on where they took him. It may seem unfair, but that's what's going to get attached to him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I will say, you mentioned the active sticks and the defensive play. I would definitely say the defensemen in there were focused on their defensive play
Yes.
almost entirely.
Yes.
The active sticks were absolutely there. They were getting back quickly.
Yep.
They were being defensively responsible. I would say Spencer Gill in particular was doing that, and I would say that when it going back to those drills, like I saw him doing exact things that they were doing in the
Yeah.
defensive group drills earlier in the day, which I thought was like, it was very noticeable to me. So he was at least following like the guidelines that he had been
Mhm.
given in terms of how to play and how to use his stick and how to go cross ice and all of that stuff. So that was really interesting to see for me, but the forwards were definitely forwarding for the most part.
Right, right. No, Gil looked good. Hunter McDonald joked about his poking goal, but he looked good. He's at a point now only because of where he is physically that for guys in this camp, obviously he's going to push him around. Uh, I do think, because we talked about Hunter on this show and what he did in Lehigh, and I do think the legend of Hunter McDonald, what he did in Lehigh this year, is a little more overblown than what we reported when we were actually watching him. You have
Yeah.
to admit that seems to have grown now.
Yeah, I think so. They are definitely all in on him. But we are going to talk about him a little bit more and some of the returnees to camp and some of the people that are like year two, for instance, and see what the differences are. We're going to do that coming up next. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We will be back tomorrow to talk more about development camp, and we're going to dig a little bit deeper into Heikki Ruohonen, and we'll have our new weekly poll and our nemesis of the week as well. So stay tuned for that. That'll drop on Monday morning. So looking at the camp returnees, I think, Oliver Bonk and Denver Barkey were the two that people were most focused on, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I think they were. And Barkey did what Barkey does. He was skating well, had good setups. You could see he needs to get stronger when he's against some of the bigger defensemen, but for the most part, he's really effective getting to the net. Bonk didn't have a chance to do anything. I mean, that team was so bad.
No.
And Carson Bjarnason did not have a chance to do anything either. So if we're not talking about him, it's just because the odds were stacked against him in that game. So he had some good saves. I just want people to know that.
Yeah, and I think, it's important to note, if you weren't there or weren't aware of the rosters, they split them into Team Briere and Team Jones in
Right.
that scrimmage. And Team Jones was by far the higher skilled team, and
Yeah.
it showed on the scoreboard. And I think they tried to balance it out by having Carson Bjarnason be the goaltender for Team Briere. But at a certain point, like it was
It wasn't
just
going to happen.
wasn't going to happen. The Team Jones had two really stacked forward lines, and there was just no way. It was like a lot of the camp invitees on Team Briere as
Yeah.
well. So, and I did notice that Team Jones was shooting in the offensive zone in the first and third, more toward where the executives were standing
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not where the media was standing
right.
in the rink. So I think that was very noticeable as well. But
Yeah, but I have good vision. Like we were able to see, but
yeah.
I did want to mention Devin Kaplan too because it just came to mind. He was not aggressive enough in the offensive zone. Matter of
Oh
fact,
yeah.
he backed off on a few plays, and again, he had a decent season. But this is another guy that's sort of like most likely fourth line or bust. And so, like
Yeah.
some of these guys that have to really start showing that because there's only so many of those players you could have. Now, maybe he'll really pick it up and become a third liner, but I don't see it.
Yeah, and so he was one of, him and Bonk were some of the few like higher end prospects that were on Team Briere. Cole Knuble was on that team. And like I said, Bjarnason was in net, but there wasn't really anybody else of note on that
No,
team in particular. So it was really hard. Jack Berglund was on that team. He was the one recent draftee.
and he did what he
Um,
could, but he's a young guy. Like
yeah.
I liked what he did, the way he got into the offensive zone and protected the puck, and but after a while they just swarmed him. Like there was nothing he could do.
Yeah. Yeah. So looking at the top line of that team Jones, it was Luchanko and Powell, which was really good to see them together. And Bump was the third person on that
Yeah,
line. And I think he did fine, but it was Luchanko and Powell that stood out on that line.
yeah, they were the drivers. I just didn't see enough out of Bump to do anything with that, and even with the pace, I felt like Bump wasn't keeping up with the pace at times. So yeah, I just feel like he's got work to do. He's got real work to do, and I do think those two guys were real good bright spots, especially Powell. And Powell just needs to have a better release on his shot because even Brent talked about it. How he's after you watch that game, how he scored his goals in the USHL. He got in close. He's a physical
Yeah.
guy. He's got some good moves, but he also could get to the net. There's going to be a time where he's going to have to shoot from the outside and score, and that's got to pick up a little bit. So that's something he could work on at Ohio State.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, as far as the other returnees, I want to hear what you have to say officially on Alex Ciernik because he was a
Okay,
source of conversation
yeah, well,
amongst a
because
bunch of people.
I'm an honest guy, and 2 years ago, I felt like there was a little more there. Now I understand he had injuries and he had concussion, whatever, but
Right.
he also went through like the World Juniors and only had a point in 3 games too. So this isn't just this camp that I'm talking about, Alex Ciernik, and I've also spoken to people that saw him more than me. My whole thing with him is he's not finishing. He looks, for Brent to say he's got elite skills, great. He skates the puck around. Yeah, he could be tricky and everything else. But at the end of the day, he's got to score. And when it was 5-on-5, he couldn't score. Matter of fact, I don't even think he had a shot on net. And others weren't sure. He may have had one, but he had no real good scoring chances. The minute it went to 3-on-3, he scored. That's a
Yeah.
tell. That is a tell that he needs more space on the ice. Now, maybe that's going to change over time, but he's one of the returning guys. So I had to grade him differently. And right now, this year, I need to see him start finishing because he's a little bit of a smaller guy, and just being tricky with the puck isn't going to get you into the NHL.
Yeah, I think so. I do think that, like I said, Denver Barkey stood out because he was just trying to do his thing and he was
Yes.
zipping down the ice. And I think
Hmm.
he had a lot of awareness in terms of the passing that was happening as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. He
He
was the
wasn't
best passer
self,
there.
yeah, like he just was not selfish at all,
No.
which I thought was a really good thing. And then, I don't know, as far as the other returnees, just trying to think about who was standing out there. Like, I don't know.
I'm looking at my list
It was,
now. I mean,
yeah, it's really
like I
hard to
thought
say.
Avon looked fine. I thought Avon
Yeah,
looked fine. And I really did think Ethan Sampson looked fine. I thought he was fine too. I feel like Ethan Sampson is never going to stand out like as this great defenseman or great offensive defenseman either way. But I feel like if he does his job, you'll see him making some smart clears and doing some things and moving the puck. And I felt like he did that. So I felt like those guys, did that well. It wasn't enough to write a report on. That's all. And sometimes that's the way it is. Like Bonk did well. I didn't write anything about Bonk because it's like he really didn't get a chance to show anything.
Right. And I would say of the other defensemen, Carter Sotheran did not really stand out to me either
No, he
way,
didn't.
good or bad.
Right.
And obviously he was a fifth rounder, but he plays for Portland and he had a pretty successful season. So
He did.
I might have expected to see him pop a little bit more, but I didn't see that in particular. Now, again, obviously eyes were more focused on the newer draft picks because
Right.
that's the nature of the beast, but it is important to track these other guys year to year and see how they're doing.
It is, and I do, and I've always done that, and I didn't see anything that was worth noting, good or bad. So, in a lot of times, that's okay.
Yeah.
If it was more bad, then it's worse. So I think he gets a pass from me. It's all right.
Yeah, and like we said, Carson Bjarnason, I think it was just hard to really gauge in that scrimmage. And you're looking at drills, and we saw him make some really good saves in the drills, but that's not really game situation. So
See,
I think this upcoming season is going to be really interesting for him.
it will. I mean, here's the way I look at this. I don't look at this game for goal scoring. I know that some people do. They want to mark down the goals. They want to talk about all the goals. But you see, even the players don't really care about their
No,
goals. It's really about how they're doing their job.
except for Hunter
Like,
McDonald, he cared.
right. Yeah, that was funny. But really it's about how they do their job and how they're going about their job. And that's really the way I sort of
Mhm.
graded them on what can I envision these guys doing? What were they actually doing? And did it improve during the game? And so like when I'm also basing it on what I've seen from them before previously up to this point. That's really the way I'm grading these guys in this, not just, hey, did he score in the game?
Right. Well, there were some camp invitees as well as Sawyer Boulton, who the Phantom signed. So we want to talk about all of them and if any of them stood out and maybe could be headed for more activity with the Flyers coming up next. So I do want to talk about Sawyer Bolton. Man, what a really great kid. Like super great personality. And I would say, he embraces his sort of tough guy role, his protector
Hmm.
role, very similar to his dad, but I would say he's more skilled than his dad as a player.
Okay. I mean, I don't think it's an incredibly high bar, but he played in the NHL. He played with Danny Briere, so there's something, and I remember
Yeah.
him. I didn't see enough of him, so I can't even comment on him. I don't know what there really is with him, so we'll see. For me.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. But I was just glad to see him at camp. And I thought he fit in really nicely. Like I didn't think he was overmatched. I didn't think,
No,
he
I
was
mean, I saw him
definitely
in
not the
drills
best guy
and
there.
right,
Yeah.
it's fine. But yeah, nothing stood out one way or the other for me to mention him.
Yeah. So every year, the Flyers and other teams invite undrafted or sometimes, overagers to their camps just to get a look at them, and it's good experience for these guys. Sometimes it's a local kid that gets an opportunity, something like that. And I would say the guy that impressed me the most was Jack Williams, who is a
Hmm.
forward from Northeastern University, which is again a really good program. And he just like was taking advantage of every opportunity. He was doing everything that he was asked of and all the drills during the practice sessions. And then he just really, really popped to me. He was the center of the line with Avon and Barkey. And
Right.
I was trying to suss out if it was the Barkey effect that was making him look better. And honestly, I don't think so. He was doing his own thing and he scored a goal in the scrimmage.
Yeah, I don't think it was because of Barkey, because I saw the same shot that he scored a goal on him in drills the day before, and it looked really good. So, yeah, he has a really good shot. He had scored like 17 goals with Northeastern. His skating's pretty good. Uh, I don't know what kind of future he has, but at least he showed that off. So yeah, that was noticeable.
Yeah, I think, he's 5'11", 175 right now. So, I it's so funny because we didn't even really mention, but the defensemen were just huge at
Yeah,
this camp. And the only way you could really tell because they were all so huge relative to each other was looking at Kara Mori on the ice, who's much,
right.
much shorter, and realize how tall they all were. But I know that Williams is a forward, but I think he's a little undersized relative to the rest of the guys at camp. He's 22, so a little bit older
Hmm.
at this point, but I do really think he was taking advantage of this opportunity
No
and
question.
really, I think, made a mark for himself. But was there
He
anybody
showed
that
well.
you thought stood out amongst the invitees?
Yeah, I thought Jack Page showed some really good speed. I was surprised to see a guy 6'3" skate like that.
Mhm.
He was able to get ahead of the pack a few times. He's a local Westchester kid, so I was like, all right, he's going to BU. He only played 4 games at BU, and I don't know why. So maybe just because they had too good a team, maybe he got injured. I don't know all the specifics because I don't watch teams that closely during the season. I just follow prospects. So until like basically till the end of the season with the Frozen Four. So yeah, I don't have a good feel for that part, but yeah, I felt like he got me to know his name. I didn't know his name before this.
Yeah, and I do think he stood out. He's a left-handed shot defenseman, and but yeah, he's huge. It was very amongst the towering
Yeah,
group of defensemen at this camp, but I thought he fit right in really
yeah,
well and showed out in the scrimmage for sure. Um, I do want to mention Mateo Dreback, who is one of the goaltenders um, that they brought in. Carson Bjarnason was the only prospect goaltender there, and Dreback is from Ontario, and he is somebody that I don't know what kind of future there is for him, but I will say that during the drills and stuff, we didn't really pay attention to anybody that wasn't Bjarnason because
right.
there isn't honestly much reason to, but in this scrimmage, this guy made some really tremendous saves, and I was really happy for him that he was able to stand out that way.
Yeah, in that regard, I'm happy for the guy. It didn't really move the needle for me, unfortunately, like to say anything more. But yes, I acknowledge what you saw.
Yeah, yeah. So that was good for him. But
It was.
I think as far as this camp overall, I think the new draftees that we wanted to stand out in the ways that they stood out pretty much checked out with expectations for them, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, I feel like most did. There were a few that were a little disappointing to me, and I've already gone through those. So I feel like most everybody's getting a good start on the season, and I think that's really the big thing. Unfortunately, we don't know like what kind of marching orders they get, but I know when Sam spoke the day before, he was very honest about how many times a year he keeps up with a guy, and it's I think he said it was something like 4 or 5. Uh, so that's good, and so that's if that happens with a lot of their scouts, then they could really check on the marching orders on most of these guys. So yeah, that's pretty good coverage if that's like the standard.
Yeah, it does seem like the player development folks are really keeping a close eye on the guys that they're assigned to, and that
Yes.
is a good sign.
When they can,
Uh,
obviously they get injured, like Sam said, and sometimes there's
right.
travel difficulties, but yeah.
Yeah, that's Samaran we're talking about,
Sam Ryan,
just in
yes.
case. But yeah, he seems really focused and dedicated to helping these guys out.
Dedicated's
And
the word, and I think that's the big thing because I can't tell you if he's effective at his job or not yet because he's in it. He hasn't been in it long enough, but he's
right.
dedicated to it, and that's the first sign.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's enthusiastic and dedicated, which is a really good
Noticeable.
thing to see. Very noticeable, and knows a lot about the players he's assigned to. Like,
Yes.
it knows a lot of specifics. So that was really cool to see. I'm really happy for him on that front as well. And then I think, the returnees were fine. I think again, it wasn't like nobody of the returnees blew us away, but we got what we needed to out of the guys like Bonk and Barkey. But you know, like it would have been nice to see one of the other lower draft picks just kind of pop a little bit
Right.
more, but they didn't as much.
Yeah,
Other
Bonk and
than
Barkey right now are still like leading the pack. Regardless of the hype of Hunter McDonald, he's still got to play a lot of games in my eyes. I just would not be rushing this guy into too much. I really want to see the guy play a full year in Lehigh. He should not be like the first call up to the NHL or anything like
no.
that. But I know there's, discussions that, just could be for fun. It's not with the team. It's just for fun. And hopefully it stays that way. But there's just so much enthusiasm for this guy. I've seen the script before. So hopefully the Flyers can stay away from it. But honestly, yeah, Barkey and Bomb, fine. Barkey he doesn't have a perfect path to the NHL either, because he still needs more two-step explosiveness. He still has to get stronger. And so he's not going to go straight into the NHL. He needs to play in the AHL too. Bonk, it's possible he might be able to skip a step or only play a short time in the AHL, but that's right now he's the only guy that's tracking that way.
So we will be keeping track of all these guys as they go into their next seasons, whether it's at junior, whether it's in the AHL. Looking forward to all of that, or college, I guess, is the other option there, or Europe. But really excited to see where some of these guys develop over the next year, and when some of them return to camp in September, we'll see what they have done over the rest of the summer. On tomorrow's show, which will be Monday, we're going to do a deep dive into Heikki Ruohonen. We'll have our new weekly poll on the new draft picks, and have our nemesis of the week. So that should be a lot of fun. As a reminder, it's always good to hear from you. So send in those mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, or comment over on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great day, everyone.